This is the 10th video in a series on what the pre-nicene Christians believed about the divinity, and this is the 7th video about God the Father. To be omnipresent means to be in all places at the same time. A common belief in Christianity is that God the Father is omnipresent. What have we heard people say about it? Some might say, God is in heaven. Others might say, God is everywhere. Others might say, God is in each of us. The early Christians believed that God the Father is everywhere. God is in every place. He cannot be confined, restricted, or contained in any place. Melito wrote, "There are persons who say, it is for the honor of God that we make the image, that is, in order that we may worship the God who is concealed from our view. But they are unaware that God is in every country and in every place and is never absent, and that there is not anything done, and he does not know it." Theophilus wrote, "This is the attribute of God, the highest and almighty, and the living God, not only to be everywhere present, but also to see all things, and to hear all, and by no means to be confined in a place. For if he were, then the place containing him would be greater than he. For that which contains is greater than that which is contained. For God is not contained, but is himself the place of all." Clement of Alexandria wrote, "God is not in darkness or in a place, but above both space and time, and qualities of objects. Therefore neither is he at any time in a part, either as containing or as contained, either by limitation or by section. For what house will you build to me, says the Lord? No, he has not even built one for himself, since he cannot be contained. And though heaven be called his throne, not even in this way is he contained." In the last video, we looked at how God exists outside of and encompasses time. In the same way, Clement says that God exists outside of and encompasses space. So God the Father transcends both time and space. Tertullian wrote, "For as the Creator is shown to be God, God without any doubt, from the fact that all things are his, and nothing is strange to him. In contrast, the rival God is seen to be no God, from the circumstance that nothing is his, and therefore all things are strange to him. Since then the universe belongs to the Creator, I see no room for any other God. All things are full of their author, and occupied by him. If in created beings there be any portion of space anywhere void of deity, clearly the void would be of a false deity." Tertullian addresses the question on whether God is found within each person. God does live in a person, but only when that person is not living according to a false deity, and is living according to God the Father. Tertullian is saying that, for those who reject God the Father, they have a void in them which has been filled with a false deity. The belief of God's omnipresence is difficult for humans to understand. Do they know of any other thing that exists in every place? Is there an illustration that we can compare this to? Well, not even air exists in every place, since it does not exist within solids or in the vacuum of space. Something that makes this concept even more difficult to understand is the scriptures that speak of God the Father coming down to men. If God leaves one place or arrives in another, does that mean there are certain places where God is or where God is not? Origen helped explain this and wrote, "The illustrious Celsus, taking occasion I know not from what, next raises an additional objection against us, as if we asserted that God himself will come down to men. He imagines also that it follows from this that he has left his own abode. For he does not know the power of God, and that the Spirit of the Lord fills the world, and that which upholds all things has knowledge of the voice. Nor is he able to understand the words, 'Do I not fill heaven and earth?' says the Lord. Nor does he see that, according to the doctrine of Christianity, we all in him live and move and have our being, as Paul taught in his address to the Athenians. Therefore, although the God of the universe should through his own power descend with Jesus into the life of men, and although the Word, which was in the beginning with God, which is also God himself, should come to us, he does not give his place or vacate his own seat, so that one place should be empty of him, and another which did not formerly contain him be filled. But the power of the divinity of God comes through him whom God chooses, and resides in him in whom it finds a place, not changing its situation or leaving its own place empty and filling another. For in speaking of his quitting one place and occupying another, we do not mean such expressions to be taken topically, but we say that the soul of the bad man, and of him who is overwhelmed in wickedness, is abandoned by God, while we mean that the soul of him who wishes to live virtuously, or of him who is making progress in a virtuous life, or who is already living comfortably toward, is filled with or becomes a partaker of the divine Spirit. Explaining the same thing from another angle, Origen wrote, "We do not ask the question, shall we go to God? As though we thought that God existed in some place. God is too excellent a nature for any place. He holds all things in his power, and is himself not confined by anything whatever. The precept, therefore, thou shalt walk after the Lord thy God, does not command a bodily approach to God. Neither does the prophet refer to physical nearness to God when he says in his prayer, My soul follows close after you. Therefore, Celsus misrepresents us when he says that we expect to see God with our bodily eyes, or hear him with our ears, and to touch him sensibly with our hands. What do the Scriptures say about God's omnipresence? When Solomon began building a temple for God, he wrote, But who is able to build a temple for him, since even heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain him? Who am I then that I should build a temple for him except as a place to burn incense before him? And when Solomon finished the temple and dedicated it, he prayed, But will God indeed live on earth? Even heaven, the highest heaven, cannot contain you, much less this temple I have built. Preaching about all of mankind, Paul said, In him we live and move and exist. Jeremiah wrote these words from God, Will anyone hide himself in secret places and I not see him? Do I not fill heaven and earth? And so from the mouth of God the Father, he reveals to us that he fills heaven and earth, each and every place. There is no place where he is not present. God the Father is omnipresent. Whether at locations in heaven, locations on earth, or even within ourselves, God is in every place. But it is worth talking more about God being in us. Tertullian wrote about those who do not live for God having a void in their life which is filled with false gods. God is in every place without exception, but the question that remains for each person is, will they accept God's presence in their life? Will they allow God's will to be done in them as it is in heaven? Origen wrote, continuing his thoughts about being filled with or becoming a partaker of the divine Spirit and God's power. And if we must speak of a change in anyone by the appearing of the power of God, and by the entrance of the word among men, we shall not be reluctant to speak of changing from a wicked to a virtuous, from a dissolute to a temperate, and from a superstitious to a religious life. That is, the person who has allowed the Word of God to find entrance into his soul. Blessings, and so forth.